On February 9th of 2004, 21-year-old UMass student Maura Murray drove from her dorm in Amherst, Massachusetts to the White Mountains of New Hampshire.
At approximately 7:27 p.m., Maura spun out her 1996 Saturn on a hairpin turn on Route 112 in North Haverhill. There has never been a credible sighting of Maura since.
Maura is 5 foot 7 inches tall. She weighs 120 pounds, and she has brown hair and hazel eyes.
If you have any information regarding Maura's disappearance, please submit it to us, the Murray family through their Facebook page, or the New Hampshire State Police Cold Case Unit.
This is Missing Maura Murray. Welcome back to the Missing Maura Murray podcast. I am Tim here today with Lance in the Crawlspace studios in Wormtown. Lance, how are you this holiday week?
I'm doing very well. I'm looking forward to the holiday weekend, looking forward to spending some time with the family during Thanksgiving, which if people are listening right now, at least take one earbud out so you can be present during your family's dinner.
Yes, and for our Thanksgiving special, Lance, we traveled to New York City, the city that never sleeps, to see Kevin Balfe and Alyse Powers of CrimeCon, of Red Seat Ventures. They are the people behind CrimeCon. Check it out at crimecon.com. We get into some of what they did at their latest event called Crowdsolve in Seattle that took place in October of 2019, and they've got another one of those coming up in Chicago in February 2020. So check that out on crimecon.com.
Yeah, we got into a really good conversation with Kevin and Alyse about this because Crowdsolve is the offshoot of CrimeCon where it's hyper-focused on one case. They have law enforcement, family, friends of victims themselves, and they're given evidence and they attend lectures from experts in criminology, how to interview potential persons of interest, and then they rotate and they come together later on and they try to uncover something that maybe law enforcement couldn't see just from being too close to the case. And they actually walk away with some really interesting findings, and it's very educational. And the way Kevin describes it is really eloquent, and the mission statement behind it is this is how to utilize your power as a citizen detective.
Right. You don't have to feel bad about being in crime media. You just have to be thoughtful and responsible. And what they're doing is quite revolutionary, I would say. And I commend every law enforcement agency who tries to take that step with them. I think it's remarkable.
Yeah, exactly. And it's very productive, and they see how to use that in order to move a case forward. And we were reassured that Chicago in February, it's February 21st to the 23rd, although we're talking Chicago in February, Kevin assured us most of it is going to be inside. Actually, all of it's going to be inside. So do not worry about any sort of need to pack additional parkas.
Well, thank you very much. So I hope you enjoy this episode with Kevin and Alyse. Wanted to let you know that we are very aware of what's going on in the Maura Murray community, oddness that's out there. We will address this stuff in future episodes, but not today. So thank you very much, and hope you enjoy your holiday weekend. Well, we are here in New York City at Red Seat Ventures at CrimeCon headquarters with Kevin Balfe and Alyse Powers. What is going on, you two?
Alyse, what's going on?
Not much.
Alyse refuses to get by the mic, as you guys see, so I'm going to have to translate for her.
She actually took the mic and threw it on the floor.
It's a callback to your podcast on the CrimeCon podcast from a year ago.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, if everybody has the opposite of the thing, like hers would be dogs and microphones. Right. That'd be exact opposite end of your life scale.
Right.
Oh, one thing you really love and one thing you...
They're at complete opposite ends.
So what's been going on?
We've been busy. We just did a first Crowdsolve event in Seattle, and then we are starting into Orlando planning. We got another Crowdsolve in Chicago, starting into Orlando, and then we have a little cruise coming up next year too.
Oh my gosh.
Okay, so anybody who doesn't know, this company produces the very fantastic The Fine Crime Con, which is going on year 4.
Yes.
And you've then branched out to this Crowdsolve thing.
Yes.
And the first one was Seattle.
Yep.
Explain what the purpose of Crowdsolve is. Meaning, am I going to go there, have a couple of cocktails, get hammered, talk to crime fans, or am I going to get my hands on some evidence?
Definitely the latter. I mean, this is, I would say, if CrimeCon is like a buffet, this would be like fine dining, single entree sort of restaurant.
Did you just make that up now?
I did just make that up.
Wow.
Yeah.
That is the way to sound.
I'm impressed.
Yeah.
CrimeCon is a lot of a little, and this is a little of a lot.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Wow,
No, sorry, the opposite. CrimeCon's a little of a lot. This is a lot of a little.
Okay.
Either way, I know what you're talking
Whatever.
Do you
know
just
what
make
I
that
mean.
up,
I
too?
don't know. So this was really driven by CrimeCon attendees, though, and you guys know we do these very extensive surveys after the big events, and we just kept hearing from people that they love CrimeCon, but in certain instances where they would do a 1-hour session on a particular cold case, especially, that it wasn't enough, and that they just felt like they kind of met the family and met the police, and now we're kind of ready to become activated and dig in themselves. And CrimeCon itself isn't really set up for that. It's very, every hour there's something new and you're always shifting. So it really came out of that, plus meeting over the 3 years of doing this, so many families and so many folks from law enforcement. And we just spent a lot of time trying to figure out if we were going to do an event this way that was really a full weekend on one cold case, how could we do it in a way that would, stand for what we stand for, which is real education, real activism and advocacy, and not like a BS-y thing where you just show up and you like, oh, I think the butler did it. No, real, right? How can we make this a real experience? So that took a while, but I think we pulled that off in Seattle, and we'll see what happens in Chicago, but we're optimistic.
Before we get into the case that you focused on in Seattle, I think this really speaks towards the particular crowd that goes to CrimeCon and the nature of the fan base that CrimeCon has.
Yeah, you sourced the information based on what the people said. I mean, I think that's really smart.
Yeah, I think a lot of people sort of criticize CrimeCon a little bit by saying these are people who are showing up and it's this morbid dark tourism type thing, and it's almost glorifying crime and taking advantage of these horrible tragedies. But what you've done is pulled from that crowd and created this thing that actually is useful in solving some of these cold cases that wouldn't be looked at anyway.
Yeah, exactly. We're really proud of that. And I get the media calls and do the interviews all the time where I think that line of questioning is what they come in with. Mm-hmm. And, hopefully in a lot of cases by the end, we've been able to shift that narrative and say, look, when we built this, we could have done anything. I mean, you can cater it however you want. If we wanted a convention hall filled with people in cosplay as serial killers, sure, we could have done that. We specifically have built this in a way, both programming wise, price point wise, policy wise, to bring the right slice of the true crime crowd in. And I don't ever try to tell a reporter that the things that they want to say about what we all do in the genre don't exist. They do, but that is everywhere in life, right? There's bad things and bad segments in almost anything you can think of in life. Yeah. And it's just on us to make sure that we're doing things the right way and representing ourselves in the right way. And so, when they challenge us, well, how are you not just glorifying? How are you not reveling in the worst day of someone's life? I mean, I think things like this, things like the Delphi panel you guys have seen, right? The Indiana State Police is coming in with the families. Those are important things to us where these are, we're really making change. Yeah. The other example I used from last year is the Laura Richards, Dirty John example, right? Here you had a media property in Dirty John ultimately the show on Bravo that educated a lot of people on coercive control and stalking for the first time. They understood it, right? And domestic violence, and women who've experienced these things can now sort of relate to a real story, but in a media property. And then she comes on site and says, let's take this a step further. Now let's do the advocacy for how do we take all the people at CrimeCon who want to help us make real change in terms of the laws. how do you take this back to your own state and get involved to say, hey, coercive control laws should be tighter than speeding ticket laws. And so again, how do you use the platform for change and good? I think those are the ways we're doing it, and Crowdsolve is sort of the next evolution of that for us.
Yeah, I think that's great. I think you guys are definitely doing it. And as Lance said, I feel like no one who actually has attended really has that thought. I think maybe that's like a media thing.
You mean no one who's attended CrimeCon?
Yeah, I don't think they are, think that this isn't about victims or, this is glorifying things. I don't think they think that at all.
Yeah.
I've never had that feeling.
Actually, you two hustle. I mean, that says a lot. Every time we've gone to CrimeCon and we've left, we have a conversation about how we see you two running around. Like you were not the event planners that, wear their Gucci shoes and have like the slick suits on and sort of put themselves in front of everybody while everyone else and behind the scenes does all the backbreaking labor. I remember talking to you guys and being like, and feeling bad that I took up like 30 seconds because you're running around with just stuff to deliver to tables or to this or that. And I think that also goes unnoticed by people that you put that much of yourself into this. And
well, thanks for saying that. I mean, Alyse probably more than me. I wear the Gucci and stand in the table. It's. I was thinking this year I have to like actually get into a gym before start training or something. It's physically and mentally exhausting. I mean, from no sleep beforehand all the way, through the event on site. We feel a personal connection and obligation to. This isn't Comic-Con where if a session goes poorly, then whatever Warner Brothers will live like. These are, when you're talking about families and you're talking about the content that we are talking about, it's important that things go right and that the structures are in place for things to go right and that the right fans have gone to that session so that the dialogue is right. And you guys know we handle stuff too that's pushed the envelope a little bit, right? We did Cannibal Cop last year, which I still hear about.
Yeah.
We did it because to me that's a really important interesting legal issue going forward, right? About thought crimes. But without the right people in that session, which turned out to be asking highly intelligent, respectful questions, that could very easily be a disastrous session. And so, it's not just plug and play where we set a thing up and go. It's, it is high maintenance through the whole weekend, but I think that certainly helps it come out well.
Yeah.
So how long does it take to plan an event?
I'm almost the year. I
thought you were going to say like 3 months.
A couple days.
We're deep into booking now for May, and then we just booked our 2022 venue. So we're 2.5 years ahead on locations.
Wow. Okay. Shoot. Can
I'm
we
gonna
guess?
I'm gonna guess.
No, but Alyse has a great poker face. You'll never get it.
London,
Austin, Texas.
London, Montreal, Mexico City.
These are great international guesses.
Okay, so tell us a little bit about Crowdsolve then. This year you were in Seattle in October of 2019, talking about 2 different cases.
Yeah. Well, not by choice. So I guess my elevator pitch on Crowdsolve would be this: if you consider yourself like basically a detective, if you enjoy watching the shows and sort of trying to get a step ahead of putting together the clues and who did it, right? If you're that type of true crime person, that's what Crowdsolve really is. We spend a full weekend with one case file. We have the family and law enforcement present. Everyone in the room is under a non-disclosure confidentiality agreement, so everyone feels very comfortable to be able to really talk about what's going on without, some of the worries that happen in digital spheres. And then we surround all that with sort of our relationships with key experts. So let's talk about Seattle for a second. We chose a case, and then about a month after choosing the case, a guy calls 911 and confesses. As a 10-year-old cold case. Guy calls 911 and confesses. The next day he recants his confession. So we sort of, in that instance, were left in a difficult spot where, if this guy really did do it and DNA comes back before our event, what are we going to do? There's nothing to solve. But at the same time, we had developed relationships with the police and the family and felt we owed them a responsibility to continue. So we made that case, which is the case of Nancy Moyer, sort of the first day of the event. And then we turned to a featured case where we gave it the full sort of Crowdsolve treatment for Friday, Saturday, Sunday. And that was a woman named Karen Bodine. She died 12 years ago. She was strangled to death. body was left naked on the side of a road in a sort of displayed position, which was fairly random. She had hit some hard times. She had done, fell into some drug use and a little bit of transient behavior. But she had also come out of that. She was a mom. She is a mom. She right before her death then sort of had a little bit of a relapse. But it didn't, I think because of a lot of those issues, it didn't make news the way a typical story like this would, which we found really interesting. There was like 1 or 2 local news stories just from the day, and then that was kind of it.
Really?
And in talking to the police, they said, I said, if you've got one cold case that you think is solvable, what's the one? And they said, Karen Bodine. He said, I drive by the memorial every day. I'll never forget it. He said, I think this case just needs a little push. And to us, that's what we can bring it, right? We can bring not only attendees, but we can bring local media attention back and all the things that a cold case needs. Ironically, on the Nancy Moyer side, that's why this guy called 911, right? Crowdsolve was coming. A podcast had been dedicated to the case.
Yep. And
whether or not this guy ultimately is guilty, the pressure was created in this situation where he was like, I can't take it anymore. And he called 911. So anyway, as an attendee, I think that's the experience. You show up, we have it very structured. You're surrounded by experts. So in the case of Karen, the strangulation was a key thing. So we brought in one of the world-renowned strangulation experts to really talk about what that means, what was the literature, what various marks would have been, what would have happened, what would not have happened. Reconstruction of the crime scene was a big deal in this case. And then witness statements, right? 6, 7, 8 people, all with very different versions of events. Who do you believe? What are the ways to sort of discern deception inside the statements? 800 pages of case file, I think 1,000 pages of photographs, plus all the videos of the interrogations is a lot to synthesize. But I think attendees came out with a whole new appreciation for what it is really like to be a cold case detective.
Yeah.
Is this all presented in like a conference room setting? Is like a sort of, do you have the screen up there and it's a PowerPoint and someone's talking about it, or are people gathered around a table all looking at the paperwork and the evidence?
So we did it basically like trying to think how to explain it. We'd have like a general session where everybody would come in, and that would be like homeroom almost, right? So you'd start there in the morning. Art Roderick, who's our chief investigator, you guys know him very well, obviously. Shout out Art A. Let's go Pats. He 40 years in the marshals and other whatever. So he knows what he's doing and was able to really help us define the investigation. So what we ended up doing was like homeroom. Then you get assigned to a breakout group, A, B, or C. And when you went to your breakout group room, you might be doing like means, motive, opportunity work, and then be assigned like 5 specific suspects where we would give you their pieces of the case file, all their statements, their whereabouts, the timeline, right? Or you might be in a timeline group where your job is to reconstruct just the weekend of her death using all these witness statements. So then you'd rotate and we'd move you around. And then in a lot of cases, you also had to have an education before you could really comment, right? So thinking about the DNA or the medical examiner that we brought in, right? There's like a 101 session that almost has to go on before we can even let you into the case file. Otherwise, this stuff doesn't make sense. So I'd call it like, a third education, a third sort of like real detective work. And then a third, like just great community relationship building. I mean, people became very close friends quickly in this experience because you're bonding. It's very emotional and very intensive.
Were there any standout people, like anyone hired immediately for a detective position?
I think Detective Hamilton had his eye on a few people that were, a lot of people. Also, you understand group dynamics. When you see a group like this, there's about 300 people. Some people, and you have to build it like this as event organizers too, where some people are like type A, boisterous, want to lead the whole group, right? And others who might have some really good ideas are kind of just quiet in the back of the room, like very cerebral, reading everything, thinking through everything. So ultimately, while there was a professionally facilitated end to the event where like meeting facilitators came in and did, the big boards on the wall where you're doing word clouds and association to really get that crowd stuff. What we also did was, because, in law enforcement, everyone loves acronyms. We did a case analysis report, a CAR, which allowed every individual got one for both cases. And that allowed each individual to really provide that information. So if we missed something in the group setting, it kind of got picked up there. Mm-hmm. And then we're able to deliver back to Thurston County both great macro things that are quantitative. So 72% of people believed this as it relates to this witness statement. 99% did not believe it or whatever. But then also the sort of real, long form, in some cases the more wild theories, and in some cases the more tactical sort of things around testing of evidence or new lines of questioning for witnesses, things like that.
Now, you said that some people were more boisterous and some people were a little bit more reserved, but I think the common thread in all of this is everyone has that human condition of wanting to untangle this knot. Once they're in the setting and they know that there's some sort of tangible or realistic conclusion, they want to collaborate. And I think plucking those people from those different personality traits is really cool.
Yeah.
And then rotating and doing it again and seeing who stands out and then eventually like people become friends and it's this camaraderie thing.
Exactly.
And it's all this big collaboration, which leads me to my question of, is there any sort of, I guess, prerequisite that you look for when people are signing up for this? Or is it
No, I mean, we ask if you are associated with any professional law enforcement, and there are some folks who have some connection, whether even if they're just like a clinical psychologist or something that deals. But like generally speaking, and I think ultimately this is what the police said to us at the end, that they were surprised. First of all, it's a self-selecting group. If you're going to pay money to go and be in this environment because it's something you're willing to do, you're already passionate, you're already engaged, and you're already intelligent. So that's great to start. And then I think they were surprised by just the level of the how good the questioning was so quickly from people who really aren't professionals at all, right? Their ability to pick up on threads and pieces of evidence and things, which is it's the fresh eyes approach that we were going for. But it's always TBD whether that's going to happen. Like they told us, listen, over the last 12 years, 5 professional seasoned detectives have had this case file as their case, and there's been no breakthrough, right? So we feel like professional detectives who pick up the work of other professional detectives and get that tunnel vision of the way that investigation was proceeding, that's being done and has been done. We want you guys to like be on a totally different roadway, come in from a completely different side. There's no question that's dumb, right? If you think we should have asked someone something and we didn't, tell us. And I think their openness and lack of having an ego about it is really key too. And, to be honest, as we've gone around to a lot of departments to shop for cases, that's pretty rare. I mean, think like anybody else, a detective says like, I don't want my work being questioned by 300 people. And no, thank you. Pass. Right. But what does that really say? That's just like, well, you don't want, in this case, unfortunately, the questioning of your work is about delivering justice to a family. So what's the priority?
Yeah.
Right. And also you're a detective who has other cases.
Right.
And it's you have to get over that ego part that says, these people aren't here to challenge your ability to solve a case. They're here to help because they understand that, this case falls down the priority ladder because you just keep getting assigned new cases. Yes. And it's not a question of whether or not you can, you have the brain to solve it. It needs to be solved and we're here to help.
Exactly. And I think us talking in the studio, that makes a lot of sense. But to a detective or to a chief of police, like, what is the upside for me? You guys come in and solve this, and then the media says these incompetent idiots spent 12 years trying to solve a case and 300 average citizens did it in a weekend. Like, I don't want that headline. No, thanks.
Yeah.
That's the easy thing for them to say. And I give the departments who look at that the other way a ton of credit because it's risky to do it the other way.
Yeah.
And were they happy with the results?
Yeah, they're thrilled, and I think the thing that he's not thrilled about is how much work he has to do on top of all the other, but
new leads.
But I say that facetiously. Of course, he's happy to do the work. That's why he's a detective. But I think he's surprised by how much good stuff. And I think, like anything else, it's a little bit of a squeaky wheel situation, right? There are a ton of cases that even in that county and that detective can work on. I think when you spend a weekend with people like us and like the attendees who get so excited and you see the family and the emotion, like it also clicked in him of not that, again, it's not that you don't feel that before, but to see it viscerally for that long on site, I think he went back in with a whole new renewed amount of energy, to say like, I got a lot to do. I got to get to work. And here's some new fresh ideas. I gave you guys one thing, when we were talking before about a specific piece of evidence that a specific test can be run on only by one country in the world that has this machine. And this small county in Washington State had no idea. Right. So sometimes it's just even making those sorts of connections and introductions that could be real meaningful in a case.
Yeah, communication.
Yeah.
And he probably deputized everybody, right?
He did send me a patch for my sweatshirt, which I was super
that's
appreciative
nice.
about. Yeah.
Nice. And did Art Roderick happen to give you the U.S. Marshal pin that he was supposed to
Still
give
waiting,
me?
Arthur, where is it?
Yeah.
Well, Lance,
He's fired for Chicago if I don't get that.
Yeah,
Mine's in the mail.
I'm not even asking for one.
Yeah.
Lance really wants one. You want one?
I do.
But it's never going to happen for Lance. I'll tell you that much.
I don't
You
see it
think
happening based on what I heard.
No,
Yeah.
well, we can agree to disagree.
Art's such a good guy,
He
and
is.
he's so good in this in a situation like this. You
Yeah.
know, he's got the media understanding and training of how to respond to people and how to
Yeah.
respond to. Again, we got 33 local broadcast hits, which was part of what we were there for, right?
Yeah.
Bring this, King 5, the biggest station in Seattle, is doing live hits from this thing. And again, if you're one of these 6 or 7 idiots who is among the suspect pool from this 12-year-old cold case, the last thing you want to do is 12 years later turn on the #1 local news station and see a lead story having to do with your case being at this event.
Yeah.
That's just not cool for him.
Yeah.
So Art's really good at doing the local media stuff as well and making them understand how we're trying to approach these events.
And so charming.
He is charming.
Handsome.
What about, I don't know if you can tell us like the results of any of those percentages with the fellow who confessed to quote unquote killing Nancy Moyer and then recanted, Eric Roberts. What was the percentage that people thought he actually did it?
High.
Really?
I don't know if you have the exact one, but it's in like the 80s.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah,
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah. And on that one, because that's now, that went from a completely cold case to now basically it is an active investigation.
Yeah.
That's why we added the other case as well, because that case became now something that we couldn't go full in on because the police are now unable to talk about specific things related to his confession and items and DNA testing and those sorts of things. So we felt like to really get the full experience, you had to be able to get into everything with nothing off limits. And that's what we had on the Karen Bodine case. On Nancy, because of this idiot, we were left in a spot where that sort of confession, we had to work around the confession.
Right. Was there a consensus for the Karen Bodine case?
There is some consensus. It's a little bit more spread out. Again, I don't know if you have the numbers handy, Alyse, but people gravitated to a few key people. But it's interesting that even in that realm, that there are a couple that have significant percentages of people thinking like, if I had to pick my POI, it's this person. Again, everyone's sort of hearing the same evidence and being privy to the same stuff throughout the whole weekend. You'd think that kind of most people would gravitate towards somebody or something, but that didn't really happen that way. One interesting thing was in the Moyer case, there's a guy named Aaron Huntley, who's Eric Roberts' nephew. And we surprised everybody by bringing him in.
Oh, wow.
We didn't put him on the schedule. We just called it like a persons of interest conversation. And then we put him on stage with Art. And, I think for attendees, again, in a room with the door shut and everyone under NDA, to be able to say to this guy, right, exactly what you want to know as if you were the detective interrogating him was like a really cool experience for everybody. And also give a lot of credit to Aaron, for showing up to this thing for what reason other than, you want to help people get information.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah. Or you have a big ego and you're a narcissist. I don't know. Some people think that as
Either
well.
way, it's a win.
Yeah. How did he seem to you guys? Was he, how did he seem?
Alyse?
He seemed like a great guy.
Okay.
All right.
Good.
You're making a gesture like he had sweaty palms. No,
he seemed nervous. He definitely seemed nervous, but how could you not be? You're
Right.
about to answer questions,
Right.
He didn't have, again, I'm trying to think how to characterize this without breaking any confidences, but he didn't, his answers were not always consistent. And I think our crowd called him out on that in real time, which then just led to further sort of like that back and forth when you guys, we've all talked to people in all walks of life where you're just like, why are you just not, this does not make sense what you're saying, right? Slow down and just give me the facts.
Every day with Lance.
Yeah. But I think, again, to my earlier point about giving people that real experience, that is what it's like. You get a guy in an interrogation room and you're like, you just want him to tell you the truth and what, that's not what happens, of course.
Wow. Yeah.
It's obfuscation and backtracking and, well, that's not what I meant by that. And we got a lot of that on stage. And And I think people were frustrated by it.
Really? Wow. What about Art? Did he like shake him down? Did he like rough him up a little bit?
Took out a giant phone book.
Yeah, I'm sure Art seems like a guy that was using some pretty awful tactics back in the day. Yeah. make you dig your own hole.
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So, wow, that's fascinating that the Aaron came onto the stage to talk about that. Did Art give any insight? Like, does he lead the conversation in that way, or is it's mostly for the audience to ask, or is it him starting with the interrogation?
Yeah, in that session, it was Art asking probably a half hour of questions and kind of getting Aaron to open up as much as possible, and then handing it off to a long line of attendees at a microphone who hammered him for another half hour.
Wow.
And did you prep Art beforehand with this?
Oh yeah.
And okay, and so you said you're going to have about a half hour to sort of warm him up.
Yep. Yep. And
No
Art
roughing
had
up.
read, Art had been through the case file, had read every statement that Huntley had made, and so I think as taking him real back to his actual law enforcement interrogation days, I think he pulled off a lot of those same skills. It was cool to watch.
I bet.
Wow.
Did Alyse come in as like the bad cop?
Yeah, she would deliver water to the stage, or she would withhold water from Aaron and just give water to Art.
Yeah. She would drink it in front of him.
Yeah. Oh, are you thirsty, Aaron?
So do you guys have your case picked out for Chicago? And my big question was, you're doing Crowdsolve in Chicago in February.
Yes. Because we're inside, guys.
You're inside.
It's
Okay.
cozy.
It's cozy inside.
There's
Okay.
heat, I promise.
Okay.
Yeah, you will not be standing out in the snow. It
No.
won't be 0 degrees outside.
No, everyone's and I think it's not the best time to go to Chicago. I admit that, but it
no
is
bad
the
time to
cheapest.
go.
It is, I was
It
just
is the
going to say it
cheapest.
is the cheapest time to go to Chicago, and you probably get some great rates. on
Exactly.
your-
So
Yep.
people that always, the number one thing we get is always about pricing and wise. The hotel's like $129 a night. It's the Hilton Palmer House downtown. It's
ridiculous.
beautiful.
Yeah.
So
But the restaurants are great there any time of the year.
yes.
And did you pick a case?
We have not picked a case. We have multiple. We have multiple options in multiple jurisdictions. I think we're not gonna pick a Chicago case. Obviously, Chicago PD is probably not gonna, do what Thurston County did.
Yeah.
But we have a few, and it's really, now that we've been through one, we have a good understanding of what we need out of the case. It's a little bit easier this time around as we sort of assess these files and really talk to the detectives. Like, some might say like, oh yeah, we're in. But then when you really start to press them, here's what we need, here's what we demand, here's what we want. And here's what we need out of you, by the way. This is a huge commitment of time for the detectives. They have to help us in a whole pre-development process. Then they're on site for this entire weekend, not paying attention to anything else going on. So it's a big commitment we ask for. And now we're not shy about saying what we need. And also, by the way, here's what we're bringing, right? We will get this level of attention to the case. And, if there's enough time to spin up a pod beforehand, like we had in the Moyer thing, to do that, there's a lot of benefits as well for the department, but we do ask a lot of them.
Mm-hmm.
So what about the case files and stuff? Is that you and Alyse just going through all that stuff, like burning the midnight oil, looking at figuring it out before you present it to the people you're working with on these events?
No, definitely not.
Damn.
We brought in a very qualified producer for that.
Well, thank you for waiting till I finished that question.
It's a whole, that in itself is a full-time job. Like I said, we had 2 cases, so 2 800-page case files. But even if it's just one, really having true crime experience where you've been inside a lot of case files before is important here, because you really have to, it is a noise signal situation. You really have to figure out, okay, I could give attendees these 400 pages, but they're going to read them and come away with the same thing I did, which is a whole bunch of nothing. And so attendees also need to trust that we're distilling these files out in a way that is going to maximize the use of their 3 days on site. Because frankly, if we gave you the 800 pages, it would take the entire weekend to read it.
Mm-hmm. All right. So how do we get tickets to this? Is it
you guys personally?
No.
Okay.
I meant give us tickets now.
Crimecon.com has a link, I believe, right on the homepage, or just go to events and you'll see it. It's called Crowdsolve Chicago, February 21st. Prices are going to go up. I don't know when you guys are going to put this out, but prices are going to go up 1/1. So if anyone is thinking about it, makes a great holiday gift to experience with a friend or family member.
Very cool.
This would be a good time to jump in.
Well, how do you, I guess one question is, how do you choose the cases? And Like, what is it that goes into a case that makes this desirable for this event?
Yeah. So on the choosing two ways, and we do them both simultaneously, it's the sort of bottom-up approach, which is we find specific cases that we have seen in the media or elsewhere or people have pitched us that we think are interesting, and we'll go approach the specific law enforcement jurisdictions. And then top-down, which is to say we go to specific counties or cities that we feel are appropriately sized for what we're doing, because it's not going to be layers and layers of bureaucracy. It's generally one decision maker who, if they're in, we get full, approval up and down. And we'll go to them, explain the concept, explain Crowdsolve, and then say, here's what we're looking for. We have a law enforcement sheet that lists out our criteria, and they pitch us on any cases that would be in their portfolio. And then for us, I mean, I think that the number one thing is that the family and law enforcement are both completely in and get along to some extent. Mm-hmm. They don't have to be best friends, but they do need to get along. Second, is there something to do with the case? We don't want to just read and go like, well, why don't you test the DNA? If the DNA, if this DNA matches this person, he's the guy who did it. It needs to be a little bit more layered and complex than that. So that we can provide the education piece to that. I mean, I think number one, if we don't quote solve the case at the end of the weekend, what you need to come away with is you learned a ton. And I think if you ask anyone from Seattle what the takeaway was outside of did we solve the case, it's they learned a whole bunch about strangulation from the only police surgeon in the country out of Louisville Metro PD, who's a strangulation expert. They learned about crime scene reconstruction and forensics from Karen Smith, criminal profiling from Dr. Godwin, the autopsy from our medical examiner who was there. There was just a lot of, we had a former U.S. Marshal, Mark McClish, who does statement analysis, just deception detective, how to read a witness statement and look for keywords and languages that are inconsistent.
Oh, wow.
So there's a lot of learning that has to go on. And so the case has to lend itself to that. And then finally, some geography. I mean, and again, in Chicago, it's not going to be a Chicago case, but something from the Midwest so that there's some nexus to the local media is important to us.
Right. Some nexus to the local media so that you can put the pressure out there
Correct.
to whoever the perpetrator might be.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's crazy.
And Alyse, I think she
cool.
coined the term herself, but it's a solvability factor is what she's called it.
Wow.
So
I've never heard that before. So
it's got to have a high solvability factor.
Nice.
Oh, that's great. There's like a meter.
Yeah, exactly.
I love
See,
it.
you should really be on mic, Alyse.
Now,
She's passing.
is there a capacity limit for
Yes.
attendees?
Yes, definitely. But these are small. You guys have been
Yeah.
to CrimeCon. It's 3,500, 4,000 people. This is 10% of that. So it's got to be that way because the experience is so intimate in terms of the interactions, the breakout groups, the printing of I mean, what did we print? 25,000 pages was something like that. Yeah.
Wow.
So it's going to always be a smaller group, and as such, hopefully we will hit the max because I think the more people in there, the more eyes we have on it.
Yeah. It's like Cheesecake Factory or Davio's.
Great callback.
Yeah.
Is Cheesecake Factory a buffet? Is that your comp to a buffet?
No, Cheesecake Factory has pretty decent food, but
Oh.
there's a lot to it.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
They have a big menu.
They have a giant
Very
menu.
big menu.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
And Davio's is more of a fine dining experience.
Well, thank you guys. Really appreciate you spending some time with us about this and learning some more about Crowdsolve and CrimeCon. We're looking forward to 2020.
Thanks, guys. Looking forward to seeing you in Orlando.
And the dinghy, the Crawlspace dinghy.
Oh, yeah, we'll talk
for
about
the
that
cruise.
on
Yeah,
the cruise, yeah.
We'll talk about it offline.
Sounds good.